Salutations at this point. You have already listened to more than 100 chapters, or randomly decided to start a story more than 100 chapters in. Regardless, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. If I somehow reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of 2026, I will post a Shadow Slave fanfiction I have written myself.
Chapter 201, Lord of the Dead. The giant underground chamber was circular in shape and as immense as the grand hall of the bright castle. Its walls were built out of the same gray stone slabs as the mighty walls of the dark city, but unlike them, the walls of the chamber were covered with whispering streams of cold, nebulous, black water. In the center of it, a vast mountain of human bones rose from the ground, reaching almost halfway to the distant ceiling. Thousands, no hundreds, of thousands of people must have perished to create it. With a harrowing realization, Sunny finally understood where the people who built the ancient city and the impregnable wall surrounding it had disappeared too. They were all here, piled onto each other in this vile monument of death. This horrid dark chamber was their final resting place. An old memory suddenly surfaced in his mind. Back beneath the branches of the soul tree, Cassie had seen a vision of a blood-soaked hill formed from countless corpses. On top of it, a tiny black seed was floating in a pool of blood. Was there a similar mountain of bones hiding under the soil of the ashen barrow? Was that how the soul devourer had been born? Sunny shifted his gaze, only now noticing the veins of crimson coral growing from the harrowing hill of white bones, almost like muscle tissue, of some colossal creature. Following the coral pillars up, he finally saw that the dome of the immense chamber was broken, with pale sunlight streaming through the breach and falling on the ghastly visage below. A giant stone hand was reaching down through the broken dome, its palm open, as though trying to caress the mountain formed from the bones of those people who had once populated this dark, forsaken land. Looking at the stone hand, Sunny suddenly realized where they were. The vast underground chamber was situated directly underneath the headless statue of the graceful woman who had once saved them from drowning in the black waters of the cursed sea. One of her hands was raised toward the heavens, as if trying to embrace them. The other had broken off and fell down thousands of years ago, lying in the mud at the base of the giant statue, reaching into the depths of hell. That was the hand Sunny was looking at. Right now, it was also their way out of here. Doofus, wake up. Brought back to reality by Effie's yell, he shuddered and looked around with a new understanding. So the exit the huntress had told them about was the breach in the dome of the underground chamber. With Kai's aspect ability and the help of the golden rope, escaping through it was not going to be a problem. But where was this Lord of the Dead that she had mentioned? From Effie's colorful description, Sunny had expected to see a giant monster slumbering in the heart of the catacombs. If memory served, her exact words were a big fat bastard of a nightmare creature, but he couldn't see anything, unless his eyes narrowed. And just at that moment, the mountain of bones suddenly moved. When the mountain moved, everything suddenly made sense. At first, Sunny thought that the unknown creature was sleeping inside the ghastly hill of bones, but then he realized that no, it wasn't. The mountain itself was the nightmare creature. This was the Lord of the Dead. Each of the countless bones piled on top of each other in the underground chamber was a part of its body. For a moment, Sunny was paralyzed by fear. Fat bastard. That is what you call a fat bastard. But then, the disparate pieces of information clicked in his mind, assembling into a vivid chain of cause and effect. Of course, why didn't I realize sooner? The mountain of bones, the horde of immortal skeletons, the Lord of the Dead, it all connected. The nightmare creature in front of him was a fallen tyrant. Tyrants were a fifth step in the evolution of nightmare creatures, and the name of that class was not coincidental. The fifth step represented rule and authority. That's why the blind monstrosity he had faced on the slopes of the Black Mountain was named a king, and that's why the abomination in front of him was named a lord. Classes differed from each other in terms of pure might, but most of the distinction between them was caused by a more fundamental reason. Higher classes possessed characteristics that, while not directly affecting the quantity of their power, gave it a qualitative change. For example, while beasts were mindless, demons and those above them were intelligent. That's why a demon, even if it was only slightly stronger than a monster, was in fact 10 times more dangerous. The characteristic of the tyrant class was that these nightmare creatures were capable of creating and controlling large amounts of lesser creatures. The Mountain King's larva that Sunny had slain during his first trial, which was born when a tiny worm living inside the Mountain King's body entered the corpse of a dying slave, was one such lesser creature. However, this power had its limitations. The minions created by a tyrant couldn't be of the same rank as it. That's why the larva was a dormant beast, while Mountain King itself was awakened. Similarly, while the skeletons that the cohort had faced were awakened, they had to be created by a fallen tyrant. And something told Sunny that their immortality was tied to the Lord of the Dead too. If someone wanted to destroy the undead army, they would have to destroy the abominable bone Colossus first. Said Colossus, meanwhile, was slowly waking up right in front of Sunny. And if when it did, damnation! Nervously gripping the midnight shard, he glanced at Nephi's. The golden rope was already in her hands, and she was passing it to Kai. Before the beautiful archer could take it, though, the mountainous creature suddenly rippled. A moment later, a twisted pillar of bones shot from its body, flying in their direction with the force of a siege ram. Chapter 202, Risk and Reward. Nephi's and Kai dove away, and the massive pillar of bone shot past them, before the thunderous sound of it crashing against the wall of the chamber even reached Sunny's ears. The pillar was already moving, whipping sideways with tremendous force. Luckily, he and Cassie were behind it, but Effie and Castor were not. Both of them reacted with admirable speed and fell to the ground, allowing the terrifying limb of the gargantuan creature to fly above their heads. Rising from the stone floor, the huntress screamed, "It's just thrashing in its sleep. Move. We need to get out of here before the bastard wakes up." Cursing, Sunny dismissed the midnight shard and faced the mountain of bones, trying to predict its next move. He was beginning to understand how Effie's original hunting party had perished in the catacombs. Pandinovel Co-M. A sword wouldn't be of any use in this situation. The Lord of the Dead was slowly coming to its senses. The bones, constituting its repulsive body, moved and rippled, unfurling from within the white mass like giant, twisting limbs. It seemed to be slowly turning from a shapeless hill into some semblance of a creature. What shape that creature would assume once it fully awoke, Sunny didn't want to know. Another twisting pillar limb suddenly shot from the mass of bones, blindly striking at the empty space behind the giant abomination. Sunny gritted his teeth, his ears ringing from the thunderclap of its impact against the wall. What followed was a deafening noise of thousands of ancient bones scraping against weathered stone. Pandinovel Seom. The massive pillar whipped left and right, then fell to the ground and slowly retreated back inside the body of the Lord of the Dead. Meanwhile, Nephi's was back at her feet. Dashing toward Kai, she pushed one end of the golden rope into his hands and pointed to the breach in the dome of the chamber. In the next moment, the archer soared into the air, flying to his destination with incredible speed. With a terrifying scraping sound, the whole white mountain rippled once again, and several devastating pillars of bone shot to intercept him. However, Sunny had no time to check on Kai. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small cap, and letter 1D05, letter 1D00, an oval, because the Lord of the Dead had extended two more limbs in his direction. Diving under the first one, Sunny felt a wave of fetid air rush past him. Knowing that he only had a second left to live, he then strained his muscles and jumped with all his shadow-augmented might. Sunny's body flew several meters into the air, avoiding the rushing bone tentacle only by a few centimeters. Landing in a roll, Sunny cursed and got back to his feet. What kind of an infernal jumping rope game is this? Letter 1D1B, letter 1D0F. Small cap R, letter 1D07, letter 1D00, letter 1D05. Letter 1D0D, letter 1D0F, small cap R, letter 1D07. Letter 1D04, small cap H, letter 1D00, letter 1D18, letter 1D1B, letter 1D07, small cap RS. Letter 1D18, small cap L, letter 1D07, letter 1D00S, letter 1D07. Letter 1D20, small cap IS, small cap I, letter 1D1B. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D05, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small cap L. Letter 1D04, letter 1D0F, letter 1D0D. The Lord of the Dead was slowly coming to its sense. More bone tentacles appeared from the mass of corpses, each moving with growing precision. But Kai was already standing on the palm of the giant stone hand. The golden rope looped around one of its fingers. Cassie was the first one to climb up, with the flying rapier loyally hovering. Over her shoulder, the blind girl effortlessly moved up the rope, reaching the distant ceiling of the underground chamber less than 10 seconds later. It was easy to forget that she had absorbed as much soul essence as the rest of them. Her delicate arms hid much more power than one would assume. However, back on the ground, those seconds were a real hell. The mountainous creature was waking up, making it hard for the rest of them to stay away from its blindly thrashing limbs. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small cap pen, letter 1D05, letter 1D00, small cap pen, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small cap L. They needed to get out of here fast. Effie was the next one to take the rope. The huntress practically flew up, pushing herself with agility and Herculean strength worthy of an ancient hero. Then it was Castor's turn, effortlessly dodging a pillar of bone with his incredible speed. The legacy grabbed the rope and turned into a barely visible blur. A second later, he was already landing on the giant stone palm. Nephi's and Sunny were the only ones left in the reach of the fallen tyrant. Glancing at Sunny, Changing Star yelled, "Your turn." However, Sunny did not respond. His eyes were fixed on the base of the gargantuan abomination where, amidst the ancient bones, a weak golden glow emanated from a small, partially concealed object. Sunny lingered for a moment, his thoughts moving with incredible speed. He knew that he was a greedy person by nature and one cursed with insatiable curiosity, too. However, first and foremost, he was someone who put a tremendous amount of value on his own survival. That's why, right now, his reasoning was cold to sober. It was a question of risk and reward as well as his ability. Would he be able to reach the object shining with the light of divinity and come back alive or not? A second later, he looked at Nephi's and answered, "You go, I'll be just behind you." It would be a shame to go through all of this and not receive anything in return. He had to try. With that, Sunny turned around and dashed toward the Lord of the Dead. The decision was made, and now all that was left was to execute it. Summoning the prowling thorn, he threw it at the mountain of bones. Of course, Sunny didn't hope to wound the tyrant. He just wanted to lodge the kunna in its body. Just as the throwing dagger pierced the mass of bones, a white limb suddenly shot in his direction, obstructing everything with its repulsive expanse. Commanding the invisible string to contract, Sunny jumped high into the air and flew forward as though launched from a cannon. Landing on the other side of the pillar, just a few steps away from the unencompassable mass of bones, he gritted his teeth, "Ado-ol," and then thrust his hand inside the fallen tyrant's body. A moment later, his fist closed around the concealed object, and with some effort, Sunny pulled it out in the clatter of breaking bones. A sharp pain pierced his forearm. Opening his fist, he saw a small, intricate iron key. It looked almost ordinary if not for the ethereal golden glow emanating from within it. In the next moment, Sunny suddenly staggered, feeling a wave of weakness washed over his body. Rotating his forearm, he stared blankly at it for a split second, trying to comprehend what he was seeing, and when he did, his eyes widened in terror. Chapter 203. Corpse Eater Shadow Slave. Glistening in the dim twilight of the underground chamber, an enormous leech was attached to his forearm. The creature was about a meter long, its slimy skin slightly translucent and red as dried blood. It was indescribably repulsive. What's worse, though, was that its sucker had effortlessly broken through the leather vambrace of the puppeteer's shroud and sunk deep into Sunny's arm, splitting open his skin and muscles. Currently, the leech was gorging on his blood, its belly slowly ballooning as crimson fluid rushed into it with frightening speed. With a sense of disgust and horror, Sunny slammed his fist into the spongy flesh of the revolting monster. Augmented with the power of shadows, his punch was powerful enough to easily break a human skull. The abhorrent slug, however, did not even react to it. It just continued, sucking out his blood. All Sunny achieved was sending a wave of pain rolling through his body. Pandanaval Co-M. Not good. Instantly summoning the Midnight Shard, he enhanced its edge with the help of the shadow and hacked at the leech, putting all his strength behind the strike. The blade of the Takai was as sharp as a razor, and with the augmentation provided by shadow, it slid helplessly off the leech's skin, not leaving even a scratch on it. The slug wasn't affected at all. It was still drinking his blood, consuming a dangerous amount of it with each second. Sunny stared at the disgusting creature, dumbfounded. His body was already starting to suffer from blood loss, a sickening weakness slowly spreading through it. There wasn't much time left until it would cause him to lose consciousness and then inevitably die. Think. P. Andanovel Siom. The leech had broken through his Tier 5 awakened armor without any effort. It was immune to the damage done by the Midnight Shard, which had never failed to cut down any monster he faced before. This could only Mean one thing, the damn slug was a fallen beast. Sonny blinked in disbelief. That thing is a fallen one. Are you kidding me? If this was true, then nothing he could do would harm the leech. Maybe if he was at the very peak of his rank, there would be a chance. But with his core mostly empty, and his aspect ability focused on versatility as opposed to pure might like Effie's, there was none. The gap between their ranks was just too wide. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D05, letter 1D00, N oval. Stone Saint could probably wound it, but it would take several seconds for the taciturn monster to appear and take action, seconds that Sonny didn't have. By the time she was able to do anything, he would already be dead, either sucked dry by the abominable slug or crushed to death by the Lord of the Dead. That left Sonny with only one option. If he couldn't get rid of the leech, he was going to have to cut off his arm. Maybe Nephi's would be able to grow him a new one, or not. In any case, he had to do it in order to survive. Raising the takai over his head, Sonny gritted his teeth and hesitated for a moment, despite understanding that this was the only way. He was still struggling with the idea of crippling himself so terribly. Letter 1D1B, letter 1D0F. Small cap R, letter 1D07, letter 1D00, letter 1D05. Letter 1D0D, letter 1D0F, small cap R, letter 1D07. Letter 1D04, small cap H, letter 1D00, letter 1D18, letter 1D1B, letter 1D07, small cap RS. Letter 1D18, small cap L, letter 1D07, letter 1D00S, letter 1D07. Letter 1D20, small cap IS, small cap I, letter 1D1B. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D05, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small cap L. Letter 1D04, letter 1D0F, letter 1D0D. Don't think. If you want to live, just do it. With a desperate resolve, he forcefully brought the midnight shard down, but then stopped it at the last second. The sharp blade hovered mere centimeters away from his skin. This was not due to the lack of determination, but because Sonny noticed a subtle change happening to the leech. Its belly, which had been expanding rapidly as his blood filled it, stopped, ballooning at some point. Now strange spasms were running through it. What the? In the next moment, the vile creature suddenly convulsed. Letting go of his arm, it dropped to the ground and writhed in agony. Through the translucent film of its skin, Sonny could see the innards of the giant slug bursting open. It was as though it was being torn from within by some invisible force. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D0, 5, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small cap L. No, not a force, it was being killed by his blood. The damn leech got poisoned by it. It seemed that blood weave was far more odd and tenacious of an attribute than he had thought. A second later, the whole body of the fallen beast simply ruptured, spilling blood everywhere. Sonny stared at it with a blank expression. Bringing him out of the daze, the voice of the spell whispered, "You have slain a fallen beast, corpse eater. Your shadow grows stronger. You have received a memory." As his eyes grew wide, Sonny shook off his astonishment and lunged forward. He still had to escape from this damn place. Grabbing the bloodied soul shard from the eviscerated remains of the abominable leech, he turned around and sprinted to the golden rope, dodging a bone tentacle that burst from the body of the gargantuan tyrant. To pursue him, Sonny rolled on the ground, jumped over a pile of broken bones, and finally reached his destination. As soon as he grabbed the rope, it began contracting, bringing him out of the underground chamber. When Sonny was nearly reaching the hand of the stone goddess, deafening roar thundered from below, washing over his body in an almost palpable wave. The Lord of the Dead was finally awake, but it was already too late. His prey had escaped. Climbing out of the mud, Sonny fell to his knees and then tiredly lowered himself to the ground. The breath was escaping from his lungs with laborious, raspy sounds. Weak, he felt so weak and tired, but it was so good to see the sun again. The wounds he had received in the catacombs had finally caught up with Sonny. With adrenaline gone, he was now in a sea of pain. A quiet groan escaped from his lips. That was not fun. While Sonny was contemplating this, a shadow fell over him. Looking up, he saw Nephi's glaring at him with a dark expression. She was bloodied and battered, with a deep frown contorting the graceful lines of her usually calm face. And what? Kneeling beside Sonny, Changing Star grimaced and said, "Are you insane? Why did you do that?" He tried to chuckle but ended up twisting in an excruciating coughing fit. When Sonny was finally able to breathe again, he said weakly, "Yes, no, maybe, I don't know. I just saw something shiny." With that, he opened his fist and showed Changing Star the glowing crystal. Of the ascended soul shard, he had scavenged from the corpse of the vile, blood-sucking leech. She stared at it for a few moments and then sighed. Without saying anything else, Nephi's placed her cool hands on his chest and closed her eyes. A moment later, the purifying white flame spread through his body like a warm embrace, repairing any damage done to it. Even knowing how much pain this cost her, Sunny couldn't help but be happy to feel its touch again. Soon, his pain disappeared. With his head cleared of the fog, he realized that they had done it. They had successfully escaped the Dark City. Who knew it would be so hard? Chapter 204, Mysterious Key Shadow Slave. A while later, they were resting in the shadow of the giant statue. Every member of the cohort looked nothing short of terrible. However, beneath the bloodied slots and broken armor, their bodies were whole and sound. Changing Star had healed them all, and now she was the only one who was weak and exhausted. Using the white flame, so much had taken a heavy toll. On her, sitting in the mud, Sunny raised his head and looked at the giant statue. The faceless woman. She was just like the last time he had seen her, slender and graceful, with her light flowing robe rippling in the wind, as though made out of actual fabric and not hard stone. The statue was tilted slightly to the side, with its one remaining hand reaching high into the sky. A long time ago, on the night of their harrowing escape from the Ashen Barrow, Sunny, Cassie, and Nephi's had taken shelter. In her palm, it was from its height that he had first seen the walls of the Dark City. Looking down, Sunny stared at the other hand of the giant statue, which had broken off a long time ago and fell down, crushing through the dome of the underground chamber. The speed was too fast, and with a swoosh, Wang Xuan was pulled into the whirlpool, like a little crucian carp that had been hooked and was violently pulled out of the water. With a sigh, he closed his eyes and thought, "Thank you for saving us again." Then his face darkened. Remembering the events that had transpired in the catacombs, Sunny felt his good mood evaporating. Although he had found the answer to one of the mysteries that had been plaguing him for a while now, he wasn't happy about it. The fate of the inhabitants of the ancient city had always been something that Sunny was very curious about. As an amateur explorer who spent most of his free time studying the ruins of the Dark City, he was familiar with subtle details of their culture more than most. Learning about the mundane facts of their lives was somewhat of a passion of his. If you dare to fish against him like this, no matter if it's a strange thing on a mobile phone or that ferocious giant fish, you'll have to pay the price. He had known that the history of this ancient civilization ended in tragedy. Of course, a cataclysmic disaster had destroyed it, turning the once prosperous land into the desolate hell it was today. But against all logic, Sunny still hoped that these people had somehow managed to survive. Perhaps they had migrated somewhere, leaving the ruins of their city behind, but now he knew that it wasn't so. All of them were right there below him, buried forever in a damp underground chamber, piled onto each other high, enough to form a ghastly mountain of bones. More than that, their remains had been soaked in the cursed waters of the Dark Sea and turned into a vessel for the soul of a vile nightmare creature. There were a lot of questions about the fate of these people still lingering in his mind. How did they end up in that dark chamber? Had they died there? Or had their bodies been brought there by someone or something later? How was the Lord of the Dead born? Was its inception the same as that of the Soul Devourer? But he didn't really want to know the answers anymore. He felt that learning them would only break his heart. Fissy is mocking him. With a sigh, Sunny decided to distract himself from these depressing thoughts with something uplifting and summoned the runes. One cluster in particular interested him the most: Shadow Fragments, 322/1000. He had received 4 fragments for killing the Corpse Eater, even though the manner of its death was rather peculiar. Having now killed Nightmare, creatures of the awakened, fallen, and great ranks, Sunny could surmise that his initial theory was right. The spell gave him double the fragments for killing enemies of higher ranks according to the number of soul cores they possessed. An awakened creature would land him 2 fragments for each core, a fallen one 4, and a great one 16. Then it was noisy and motionless instead of reviving. Here it chose to disguise it. It was easy to guess that killing a dormant creature, which was equal to him in terms of rank, would result in 1 fragment per core, while killing a corrupted one would result in 8, made sense. It was the same as absorbing soul shards, with the difference being that shadow fragments entered his core at the moment of the kill, and without making a distinction between nightmare creatures and humans. Looking up, he glanced at the list of his memories. Memories, Silver Bell, Puppeteer's Shroud, Midnight Shard, Ordinary. Rock, Prowling Thorn, Endless Spring, Blood Arrow. The last one was new. Slightly intrigued, Sunny read its description, if one's piece of sword energy can't solve the problem, then take a few more pieces. Wang Xuan is going to kill it. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D05, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small cap L, memory. Blood arrow, memory rank ascended. Memory tier, I memory type, weapon. Memory description, a debt of blood must be paid in blood. Memory enchantments, rain of blood, restitution. Enchantment description, the arrows are created from the wielder's blood, and as such, can rain on the enemies for as long as the archer has any left in their veins. Enchantment description, if the arrow finds its mark, it will drink the blood of the prey and restore that which had been taken from the archer. If it misses, the archer's blood will be lost forever. Hug creepy. Since Sunny didn't know how to use a bow, this memory was useless to him, which was a real shame, because it was the first ascended one he had ever received. Memories of that rank were extremely rare on the Forgotten. Sure, he could either feed it to the Stone Saint for a couple of shadow fragments, or Sunny glanced at Kai and frowned, lost in thought. While the blood arrow was of no use to him, it would be a real boon for the charming archer. With it at his disposal, he wouldn't have to carry a quiver with him, not to mention that each shot he made would be much more devastating. As long as Kai didn't miss, of course. If he did miss, he would be sacrificing his blood for nothing. Transferring the blood arrow to Kai would have made the cohort much stronger, but Sunny wasn't sure that he was ready to give up his first and only ascended memory, not for free at least. Torn, he dismissed the runes and decided to think about it later. Small cap R letter 1D07, letter 1D00, letter 1D05. Small cap L letter 1D00, letter 1D1B, letter 1D07S, letter 1D1B. Letter 1D04, small cap H, letter 1D00, letter 1D18, letter 1D1B, letter 1D07, small cap RS. Letter 1D00, letter 1D1B. Small cap A, letter Winda 07, letter Winda 07, letter Winda Towin, letter Winda 07, small cap A. Small cap in, letter Winda 0F, letter Winda to 0, letter Winda 07, small cap L. Letter 1D04, letter 1D0F, letter 1D0D, letter 1D0F, small cap N, small cap L, small cap Y. In other news, the blood weave had revealed a new trait. Turns out, Sunny's blood was poisonous, or rather damaging to anyone who ingested it. At least it seemed that way from the manner of corpse eaters. Death, he would have to experiment to find out more later, or not. Honestly, Sunny didn't even know how one would go about checking something like that, and wasn't particularly eager to find out. After dismissing the runes, Sunny finally decided to take a look at the mysterious key. Subtly glancing around, he furtively took it out from beneath the vambrace of the puppeteer's shroud, where he had hidden it. Earlier, the intricate iron key lay on his palm, glowing with a pale golden light, the light of divinity. Sunny had no idea what the key was supposed to open. He had taken an insane risk and almost died to get it. Was it worth it? Honestly, he wasn't sure, but deep down, Sunny felt that it was. For some reason, he sensed that the small iron key would turn out to be extremely important to him. Chapter 205. Journey to the South. Sadly, the cohort did not get a lot of time to rest. Despite the fact that it wasn't even noon yet, they had a lot of ground to cover before sunset. The plan they had made at the start of the day was to leave the Dark City from the south by climbing the wall near the grandiose main gates and then travel through the labyrinth to the next safe height, which was about 10 kilometers away. However, due to the fact that they had ended up in the catacombs instead and had to escape through the chamber belonging to the Lord of the Dead, the party was now to the east of the ruins, near the beautiful statue of the faceless woman. Not only did they have to circle around the city now, but there was also less time to reach safety before the flood of darkness devoured the forgotten shore once again. Standing up in a chorus of disappointed groans, the cohort assumed the marching formation and set out south. Walking through the mud of the colossal crater was not easy, but for the time being they had no other choice unless they wanted to scale the monumental stone wall and return to the Dark City, of course. Luckily, with both Sunny's shadow and Kai scouting the way ahead, they didn't have to worry about being ambushed by monsters. So, for the time being, the only thing the party had to struggle with was moving their feet through the wet dirt. The monotonous silence was broken only by laborious breathing and slurping of mud. A while later, the impregnable and seemingly endless gray wall that loomed some distance away and above them slowly twisted, drifting away. From the edge of the crater, they were finally leaving the cursed ruins behind. Turning around, Sonny looked back and studied the site of the city that had been his whole world for these past 4, almost 5 months. Far away, the floor of the gargantuan crater sharply rose, forming a tall slope. On it stood the unassailable wall of polished gray stone, firm and unyielding despite the thousands of years that had passed since the demise of its creators. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D05, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small cap L. From where he stood, Sonny could see the flood of crimson coral swelling at its base, sharp blades powerlessly scraping against the cold stone in hopeless attempts to find purchase. It looked as though the city was being besieged by the land itself. If it knew what awaits inside, the labyrinth would be trying to escape as far as possible from that damned place instead. With a sigh, Sonny looked up and noticed a lone human figure standing on the wall, watching them disappear into the distance. That figure was crooked and dark, emanating a cold feeling of foreboding. A few moments later, it turned away and disappeared from view. Harris had chosen to return to the bright castle. Trying not to shiver, Sonny lingered for a few seconds, and then hurried to catch up with the group. They were safe from him, at least for now. Because the crater was too big, the bent of its edge was almost imperceptible. Only by looking far into the distance could one say that it was actually curved. Because of this, the cohort could have continued, traveling through the crater for a long time without having to move farther away from the goal of today's journey, which lay to the southwest of their current position. However, they had to leave the crater and return to the labyrinth sooner or later, not only to escape the black water, but also because there was nothing to hide behind on this vast, muddy plain. If any flying nightmare creature decided to attack them from above, the cohort would have no defense against it. The labyrinth, while hiding its own fair share of terrifying threats at least, offered some measure of protection. That's why at some point, Nephi's led the party to the sharp slope of the crater, and the 6 of them climbed out of it. With the help of Kai and the trusty golden rope, the task wasn't hard at all. For some time after that, they walked on the ridge separating the crater from the labyrinth proper, but then finally had to turn west and enter the maze of crimson coral. Sonny couldn't help but sigh once the familiar coral walls surrounded him. Once again, he didn't miss the first months of his infernal voyage into the dream realm at all. Well, maybe a little, but not because of the damn labyrinth itself, that's for sure. The Crimson Forest was simultaneously the same and vastly different from the region of it that he had traveled through before. The coral maze itself was pretty much identical to how it had been east of the gargantuan crater. However, the creatures populating it in these parts were vastly different. There were no members of the Carapace Legion around, at least not anywhere Sonny could see. Instead, the dominant tribe of nightmare creatures in this region seemed to consist of nasty, spider-like critters that had a habit of decorating the walls and passages of the labyrinth with endless amounts of gray, incredibly sticky cobwebs. What's worse, their web seemed to be made not out of spider silk, but out of thin metal wires that were as tough as iron and could cut the victim into little pieces if it thrashed too much after getting caught. Needless to say, getting yourself stuck in these webs was tantamount to a death sentence. The deeper into the labyrinth they went, the more of these cobwebs surrounded them. It came to the point where they had to use Cassie's flying rapier to clear the path ahead every few minutes, slowing down the speed of the cohort to a crawl. During one of these stops, Sonny rubbed his face and thought, I just hope that nothing attacks us while we wait. Turning to him, the shadow glared for a few moments and then tiredly shook its head. It then placed one palm across its face, a look down as if defeated. What? What did I say? A moment later, several massive spider-like creatures jumped out of the cracks in the coral and attacked them. Chapter 206, Triumph Shadow Slave. The spiders were about the size of a human, incredibly fast, and had plates of something that resembled iron covering parts of their repulsive bodies. They looked like armored battle machines created for the sole purpose of slaughtering living things. They also looked strangely familiar. With a little effort, Sonny realized that these abominations looked a lot like lesser, much smaller versions of the giant fallen beasts that had destroyed the original Stone Saint and her kin. It's just that their size and armor weren't nearly as formidable. If so, I have bad news for you fools. As soon as the spiders attacked, the members of the cohort reacted with the deadly calmness of experienced Dark City hunters. Weapons flashed in the air, severing limbs and piercing through iron as though it was paper. Effie straight up flattened one of the creatures with a devastating strike of her battered shield. The poor beast didn't even have time to understand what a huge mistake it had made. The others were no less efficient. Sonny himself threw the prowling thorn and pulled on the invisible string as soon as it sunk into the flesh of one of the spiders, bringing its jump to an abrupt end and sending it crashing to the ground. Before the beast could stand up, Quiet Dancer streaked through the air and pierced its head clean through. Just a few short seconds after the spiders had tried to ambush the group of humans, the battle was over. 3 dead nightmare creatures were sprawled in the mud, while the 4th one ended up pinned to a coral wall with several arrows. They could have even shaved a second or two if it weren't for the need to look out for the spiderwebs. Sonny shook his head. Disappointing. Wait, why was he disappointed? Great, this was great. Not every victory had to almost cost him his life. If there was one thing to feel disappointed about, it was that this one was so swift that he had not even gotten the chance to finish any of the enemies himself, thus not receiving any rewards from the spell. But even then, he would be glad to only fight easy battles like this in the future. Nephi's cleaned the blade of her sword with a piece of cloth, listened to the silence for a few moments to make sure that nothing else was going to attack them, and then gave the cohort a go-ahead to start dressing the monsters down. Soon soul shards, strips of meat, and other useful parts were cut, cleaned, and put into Effie's enchanted bag. Everything was done with efficient speed and professionalism that could only come from a lot of experience. Sonny could only shake his head again. They were able to dispose of the iron spiders with such ease because of 2 reasons. First, as far as nightmare creatures went, these ones were not on the same level as, for example, carapace scavengers. They had a slight advantage in speed, but were not nearly as strong, agile, and ridiculously tough. If Sonny could guess, he would say that the iron spiders relied heavily on their webs and battlefield advantage to defeat the prey. Because the cohort had destroyed the webs in advance, their main advantage was gone. The second reason was the cohort itself. They were some of the deadliest humans on the Forgotten Shore. Sonny was sure that at least 4 of them could kill a Pathfinder of the host in single combat, if not one of the lieutenants themselves. They were the best and the brightest the outer settlement could offer after all. Effie had been right when she said that there had never been such a powerful cohort outside the walls of the Bright Castle before. All in all, the 6 of them were more than equipped to handle just 3 awakened beasts. The labyrinth was going to really try harder if it wished to see them dead. Sonny chuckled. Just 3 awakened beasts, yeah, how crazy did this sound, and yet it was true. Finishing up with the dead spiders, the cohort indifferently left their eviscerated bodies behind and continued on their way. After several more minor skirmishes with the iron spiders, they had finally reached their destination. Not too far away from them, colored pink by the evening sun, a magnificent arch of white marble rose high above the sea of crimson coral. The giant structure was clearly created by the same people who had built the Bright Castle and made from the same stone. It looked like a much larger sibling of the pristine arch that guarded the entrance to the White Road, which climbed all the way to the outer settlement. Only this one was much more weathered, bleak, and damaged. Signs of corrosion and deep cracks covered its surface, with one of its sides being partially collapsed. Sonny studied the arch and looked at Nephi's. "This is our stop for the night." She gave him a simple nod and said after a short pause, "We need to pick up our pace. The night is close and we might have to fight to clear the top of it." Sonny sighed. Fighting again? When would they finally be able to rest? It had been such a long day. However, he kept his mouth shut. Changing Star was the most tired out of all of them, due to healing all their wounds, no less. And he didn't see her complaining, so it wasn't his place. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D05, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small cap L to his left. Effie suddenly cursed and groaned. "More fighting, come on. When are we finally going to eat?" Sonny blinked. "Well, that works too, I guess." Staring at the huntress, Nephi shook her head and silently walked forward. Soon, they reached the giant arch. Kai summoned his bow and flew up, only to return a few minutes later and report that no terrible monster was nesting on top of the ancient structure. With sighs of relief, The members of the cohort climbed the golden rope one after another and were soon standing far above the labyrinth, silently, watching as the flood of black water drowned it in the lightless depths. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, they were left on a rectangular island made out of white marble. All around it there was nothing but the undulating waves of the dark sea. Sunny was once again surrounded from all sides by nothing but darkness and black water. He did not like the feeling. Chapter 207, Beach Episode, Shadow Slave. The night passed with no incidents. In the morning, Sunny was woken up by the sound of the surging waves and opened his eyes to see the sun slowly rising from beyond the horizon. Rubbing his face, he sat up and looked around, noticing that most of the cohort was still asleep. Only Kai, who had been the last one to stand watch, was awake, sitting on the edge of the arch and admiring the dawn with a dreamy look on his face. Sunny wanted to call out to him and warn the charming archer not to sit this close to the edge, but then remembered that Kai could fly. Yeah, like I would forget it again. Using the opportunity, he dove into the Soul Sea and summoned Stone Saint from the depths of the Shadow Core, where she was sleeping in the embrace of nurturing black flames. Just like before, the shadow did not appear from a sphere of light like an echo would, but stepped out from a whirlpool of dark fire. Then she stood motionlessly in front of Sunny like an actual statue, seemingly indifferent both to his presence and the wounds covering her body. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small cap pen, letter 1D05, letter 1D00, small cap pen, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small cap L. Sunny walked around the Stone Saint, studying the extent of damage done to her by the undead horde. The armor of the taciturn knight was battered and broken, pierced in several places by the claws of the countless skeletons she had fought. The ruby dust wasn't flowing from the breaches anymore, but he could see deep gashes on her smooth, gray skin. Bastards! Who dares to hurt his shadow? Shaking his head, Sunny dismissed the saint, sending her back into the restorative darkness of the Shadow Core. The damage, while extensive, was not really threatening to her existence. In a couple of days, his pet monster should fully recover. In fact, she already looked better than she had yesterday. Leaving the Soul Sea, Sunny inhaled the fresh air, lingered for a few moments, and then turned to Kai. Hey, Knight. Are you stupid? Don't sit this close to the edge. The charming archer looked at him and raised an eyebrow. I can fly, remember, if I fall. Sunny scoffed. I'm not worried about you falling into the cursed sea. I am worried about something dragging you off into it. That'd be terrible, right? Quite happy with himself, he grinned and turned away. What a nice way to start the day. Because everyone needed some time to rest and recuperate, they decided to spend a day on the Marble Arch and continue their journey tomorrow. As the result, Sunny was currently staring at the sight that wasn't really funny but filled him with mirth nevertheless. Back in the real world, when he had time to consume some entertainment, Sunny had noticed a certain popular trope. In most dramas, webtoons, and cartoons aimed at young boys and teenagers, the heroes would inevitably end up spending a day at the beach during their adventures. He didn't quite know why such a trope existed, but suspected that it was just an excuse to show the female characters in nothing but revealing swimsuits. Not that he had anything against it. In any case, Sunny had never imagined that he was going to end up in such an episode himself one day. This is simply hilarious. Barely holding himself from laughing out loud, Sunny glanced at his companions, because everyone's armor and weapons were damaged during the battle. The catacombs, they had to keep these memories inside the Soul Sea for a bit of time to allow them to restore themselves, just like Stone Saint was currently doing in the depths of his Shadow Core. As the result, all of them, including Sunny himself, were currently wearing nothing except for some loincloths, and, in the case of the girls, makeshift brassieres, provided these crude undergarments weren't really swimsuits, and the Marble Arch could barely be considered a beach even at night. But still, the situation was funnily similar. They were all half naked and relaxing in the middle of a something that someone could call an adventure, so it was close enough. He was in a rather good mood. Everyone was busy doing their thing. There was a fire in the middle of the arch with roasting meat filling the air with an appetizing aroma. Effie was tending to it. The tan and lean body of the muscular huntress looked like it was cut from stone, as if she was a sculpture of an ancient goddess come to life. Sunny tried to count her abs and got distracted halfway through by not so stone-like parts of her robust figure. After a couple of seconds of thoughtless bliss, Sunny had to hurriedly look away. The last thing he wanted was pure thoughts. Nephi's was helping Effie with the breakfast, next to the vigorous huntress. Her figure seemed especially slender and lithe. However, she was also extremely athletic in appearance. Her ivory skin was pleasantly contrasted against the olive skin of their boisterous pathfinder. What a sight to behold! From a purely aesthetic standpoint, of course. Seeing changing star like that reminded Sonny of the early days of their stay in the dream realm. Things had been much simpler back then. Suddenly wistful, he looked away and checked what Cassie was doing. The blind girl was resting near the fire, wrapped in her beautiful cloak. With her delicate features and small stature, she looked extremely lovely. And then there were Kai and Castor. Sonny sighed and looked down at his own scrawny body. Honestly, after all, these months spent hunting monsters, eating meat and absorbing shadow fragments, he looked much better than he used to. In fact, by human standards, he was nothing short of, well, above average. Even as far as awakened went, he could probably compete with some in the looks department. But those two specimens were simply on another level. Kai was tall and shaped like a young god, with lean muscles rolling under his flawless skin and a svelte figure that begged to be sculpted into a marble masterpiece. Sonny could swear that even sunlight was attracted to him, illuminating the charming archer in just a way to make him look as gorgeous as possible. Currently, Kai was tending to his arrows, somehow managing to make even that simple task look glamorous. Castor was much the same, with a perfect body and broad shoulders that simply screamed of power, appeal, and potency, with a darker skin to match his gallant and manly image. He was basically the epitome of masculinity. This was contrasted by a handsome but gentle face and humorous green eyes, creating a rather tempting visage. Sonny grimaced and turned away. You know what? To hell with this beach day nonsense. Let's do something productive. Chapter 208. Something productive. Shadow. Slave. Walking over to Kai, Sonny cleared his throat and forced himself to not cover his eyes. The damn archer was just too dazzling. Him being shirtless in crowded places should have honestly been categorized as a public hazard. Back in the real world, if not, there was a gross oversight. I wonder how he was made. Probably in a secret government laboratory, or a magic cauldron of some sort. I mean, there's no way that this dude is the same species as me, right? After a few seconds of Sonny blankly staring at him, Kai smiled politely. Sonny, did you want something? Sonny flinched and covered his eyes. Don't smile at me. Kai blinked. All right. Breathing heavily, Sonny glared at him and slowly lowered his hand. That's better. And yes, I did want something. Kai suddenly livened up and pointed at his chest. What is that? An accessory. What is he? Lowering his gaze, Sonny noticed the mysterious key hanging on a thread, tied around his neck. He didn't really want to show it to anyone, but with the puppeteer's shroud restoring itself in the soul sea, there were not a lot of places where he could hide it, none that he was willing to use at least. Plus, no one else was supposed to be able to see the light of divinity, so to them it just looked like a small iron key. Sonny frowned. It's not an accessory, it's a key. Kai hesitated. Oh, what does it open? Sonny shrugged. How should I know? The charming archer seemed a little confused. But if it's not an accessory and it doesn't open anything, why are you carrying it around? His questions were starting to get tiresome. Sonny sighed. To open something, of course. Kai scratched his nose. But you just said that you don't know what it opens. Sonny gritted his teeth. It's a damn key, right? So it has to open something. I just carry it around, in case I find something that can be opened by that damned key. What's so hard to understand? The beautiful archer gave him a strange look. Oh, I see. That definitely makes sense. Curses. That's not how I planned to approach him. Sonny instantly changed his expression and looked at Kai with a wide smile. The sudden shift looked sort of creepy. What I wanted to say, Knight, my dear friend, we are friends, right? Anyway, what I wanted to say was that I hope that this answer satisfies your curiosity. That's something a friend would say, right? The charming young man gave him a dubious look. I guess. Sonny made his smile wider, feeling his face hurt a little. Great, so we are friends. Well, some might say that it's your lucky day, buddy, because today, and only today probably, Sonny's gorgeous Emporium offers customers an exclusive friendship deal, just for friends of the establishment. Aren't you lucky? Kai suddenly coughed. Wasn't it Sonny's brilliant Emporium last time? Sonny blinked. Was it? Well, doesn't matter. The deal still stands. Are you interested or not? The archer lingered for a few moments and then cautiously said, But Sonny, you still haven't told me what exactly that deal entails. Is it a deal for customers you consider friends, or are you trying to sell me your friendship, or wait, do you want to buy mine, or both? I'm confused. As if waiting for that response, Sonny nodded energetically. Yes, I'm glad that you asked. In fact, I have an incredible item that I want to sell. It's so incredible that I am even reluctant to part with it. But since you are my friend, I am willing to give it away, practically for free. Full friendship discount just for you. No need to thank me, really. Attracted by the noise, the others left what they were doing and were now staring at the two of them. Effie got distracted from preparing meat and was now observing the circus with an expectant grin. Realizing that he is now the center of attention, Kai sighed. All right, I'll bite. What is that incredible item you want to sell me? Sonny remained silent for a few moments, and then suddenly stopped. Smiling, oh, just something I had gathering dust in my soul see. It's a memory that can serve as an endless supply of arrows, as long as you don't miss. The beautiful archer's eyes suddenly lit up. He glanced at his quiver and said, wait, really? You really have such a memory? Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, 0 small cap N, letter 1D05, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small cap L. After thinking about it for a long time, Sonny had decided to give the blood arrow to Kai. Having the archer of their cohort armed with it would make a lot of things easier during this journey. He could potentially earn himself a bow in the future and learn how to use it, but it wouldn't be any time soon. Plus, with how dangerous the enchantments of the blood arrow were, nothing short of excellence would fly, and excellence took a lot of time to achieve, time that he didn't have. So giving it to a skilled archer like Kai was a better decision. Their recent encounters with the iron spiders only made Sonny more certain that this was the right thing to do, but he wasn't going to give it away for free. Yes, I do have such a memory. Then he casually added, oh, did I forget to say, it can provide an endless supply of arrows, and also all those arrows will be of the ascended rank. A grave silence settled over the marble arch. You're in possession of an ascended memory. That question was asked by Castor. Kai didn't have to ask because he already knew that Sonny was telling the truth. His eyes slightly widened. On the Forgotten Shore, ascended memories were exceedingly rare, for an obvious reason. Sleepers could only get one by defeating a fall nightmare creature, and there weren't a lot of people capable of such a feat. Added to that was the fact that not every kill provided a memory. In fact, most didn't. To receive one was the dream of every inhabitant of the Dark City. Sonny shrugged. Oh, I have a couple, why? The other being the onyx armor, which was broken and useless, but they didn't need to know that, honestly, he grinned. Only the best wares in the Sonny's astonishing emporium. Wait, was it astonishing? Who cares? You get the sentiment. Castor shook his head. How did you get an ascended memory? You. The grin froze on Sonny's face. When he spoke a few moments later, all humor was gone from his voice, replaced by coldness. Well, if you have to know, I got it by killing a fallen beast. Before you ask, this time I didn't have to shake my finger or spit. I just looked at it. And it died. Then he turned his head and looked straight at Castor. I am very proficient in killing things, you know. Chapter 209. Fireside Banter, Shadow Slave. In the end, Kai agreed to his deal, in exchange for the blood arrow he gave Sonny 3 memories, the 2 weaker arrows he had, and a small charm capable of producing fire. Sonny fed all 3 to the Stone Saint, bringing her amount of shadow fragments to 31. That was 4 more than she had in the past, which meant that he received the same amount of fragments that he would have gotten by feeding her the blood arrow itself. He didn't really gain anything, but also didn't lose anything. Kai was the one who really profited from their exchange. So Sonny didn't lie when he said that it was an incredible deal. After breakfast, which transpired in somewhat awkward silence, Sonny sprawled on the ground and smiled happily. You know, guys, these past few weeks made me realize something. Actually, it was all thanks to Kai who introduced me. Introduced me, to Stev. Effie stretched, making Sonny stutter and lose the train of thought for a second, then smiled with satisfaction and glanced at him. Really? And what is that? Sonny hesitated for a few moments and said, when I was a little kid, I loved reading webtoons about the Awakened. You know, the ones where they always explore ancient ruins, battle nightmare creatures, and grow more powerful with each victory. He chuckled. The hero and his cohort decide on an adventure, vanquish evil, gain mighty memories, then return to the real world and sell their spoils at the Adventurer shop. They spend their money to upgrade their equipment and immediately set out on a more epic and dangerous adventure. Letter 1D18, letter 1D00, small capen, letter 1D05, letter 1D00. Small capen, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small capel. Cassie smiled. I loved to read those too. Sunny glanced at her and sighed. Yeah, but when I got older I couldn't help but think, what are they thinking about? Exploring ancient ruins is not a wise thing to do. In fact, only crazy people would do it. No matter how good you are, sooner or later, you will meet something more terrifying than any human can handle and die. If this was real life, why would all those adventurers go into the ruins? Over and over again, the blind girl tilted her head and opened her mouth, but then closed it. Again, Sunny smiled, but then it hit me, they were not doing it to vanquish evil, they were doing it to collect a wide variety of powerful memories. You see, the real dream is not to be the hero, one of their companions, or even the love interest. The real dream is to be the owner of the shop where the hero sells his trophies and buys new equipment. That way you can live a pretty life without risking your neck. That's the real goal. He crossed his arms and added, after a few short years of adventuring around the dream realm and collecting memories, you can retire, open a shop, and leave comfortably for the rest of your life. All you need is to sell a memory once every couple of years. Maybe make some money off the younger, less fortunate adventurers. 2. Kai laughed and looked at Sunny with curiosity. So, say that we somehow manage to return to the real world and become true awakened. Is this what you're going to do? Sunny thought about it for a few moments and shrugged. I don't know. I don't really have a lot to do in the real world apart from compiling all the things I've learned about the Forgotten Shore into a report and giving it to a teacher who was kind to me back at the academy. So, maybe I don't have enough memories yet to open a real store, though. He glanced at the charming Archer and smiled. What about you? What is the thing you really want to do if you return to the real world? Kai suddenly turned away with a look of embarrassment on his face. Oh, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. But after several seconds, he suddenly said in a shy voice, Avatar singer. Sunny blinked. A what? The Archer hesitated for a while and then explained. Avatar singer is a music competition show. Popular singers compete with each other, but the twist is that they are all using the stock VR avatars to perform, so the judges can only evaluate their voices and skill. They only learn the singer's identity after. Effie giggled. Why would you want to hide your pretty face, Knight? It's your best feature. Kai was silent for a few moments and then smiled gently. I just think that it would be nice to be judged based on my skill and talent alone, with nothing else getting in the way. Also, that would be such a great way to announce my return to the fans. Just imagine, they would be so excited. That would be a perfect media storm. Sunny shook his head. It seemed that Kai was really a celebrity, talking about things like fan reactions and media storms with a straight face. Did he even hear himself? But it was a nice dream, at least. Better than his own stupid desires by far. Turning to Effie, he asked, What about you? What would you do in the real world? The huntress grinned. I don't even have to think about it. I would go eat chicken wings, the real ones, and then start preparing myself for the second nightmare. Pretty simple. Everybody grew silent. After a while, Cassie said, Are you sure that you want to challenge another nightmare? Effie shrugged. I have my reasons, so yes, for me that is the only choice. The blind girl was quiet for a bit and then said, I would go and spend time with my mom and dad. That's the thing I want to do most in the real world. Castor glanced at her and Courtly nodded. I agree with Cassie. Family is the most important. When I come back, I will greet my father and look him in the eyes with pride, knowing that I did not let our clan down. Then I will try to do everything in my power to grow as fast as possible, to relieve him of his worries and propel our bloodline to new heights. How very legacy-like of him. Finally turning to Nephi's, Sunny looked at her with a subtly dark expression and asked, How about you, Neph? What are you going to do when you return to the real world? Changing Star was silent for a while, looking into the distance with a calm expression. Then she sighed and answered in a quiet voice, I would go visit my mom, too. Everyone grew silent. Sunny blinked, a little confused. Wait, your mom? I thought she was dead. Nephi's lingered for a bit and then turned her face away. She is, technically. Chapter 210. Shadow of the Past. Technically dead, what does she mean? Sonny glanced at the others and saw that they too were confused. Everyone except for Castor, that is, who seemed like he knew something. A few moments passed in tense silence, which was broken by changing. Starsai, looking at them, she said evenly, "My mother is one of the Hollow. She became Hollow while pregnant with me, actually, so I never really met her. Just her body." Nephi's grew silent. After a while, a strange smile appeared on her face. "It's funny, really. When my grandmother was still alive, I made a point of treating that body as nothing but a corpse. But once she passed away and we were the only ones left, well, I found myself getting a bit confused. Letter 1D18, letter 1D0, 0 small cap N, letter 1D05, letter 1D00, small cap N, letter 1D0F, letter 1D20, letter 1D07, small cap L. Nephi's shrugged and turned away once again. Anyway, before leaving for the first nightmare, I used what little money there was left of our estate to buy her a VIP spot in a specialized hollow care facility. They are treating her really well. But still, I don't like the idea of her being alone there. So when I return, that's what I'm going to do, visit her." No one said anything, heavily affected by her words. Sonny stared at Changing Star, trying to imagine what it must have felt like, growing up in the company of your parents' soulless shell, with death staring at you through those empty eyes every day, always looming over you like a dark shadow, both of your past and your future. Maybe that was a part of the reason why Neph hated the spell so much. Sensing the heaviness in the air, Changing Star glanced at them and smiled. Darkly, "What? Is this your first time meeting a Hollowborn? Well, I can't blame. You creatures of my breed are pretty rare. In fact, even I have never met another one." Then she sighed and stretched her legs, moving them closer to the fire. "So yeah, that and dye my hair. These are the things I would do in the real world first." Sonny blinked. "Dye your hair." Nephi's nodded. "How is that a priority?" Feeling that he was missing something, Sonny scratched his head and asked why. She glanced at him in surprise. "What do you mean, why? I'm not used to it and it's weird. Do I need another reason?" He stared at her with a perplexed expression. Noticing it, Changing Star frowned and asked with a tiny hint of amusement in her voice, "Sonny, did you, perhaps, think that this is my natural hair color?" He was silent for a while, then opened his mouth and closed it again. ... It's not." Nephi's looked at him for a while with a strange expression, and then suddenly exploded with laughter. Her laugh was melodic, pure, and very pleasant to the ear. With regret, Sonny realized that he had never heard it before. He wished that their lives were different so that people could hear Nephi's laugh more often, but they weren't and would probably never be. After a while, she glanced at him and smiled. "Sonny, it's Silver for spell's sake, who has natural silver hair." Luckily, at that point, Kai suddenly came to his rescue. "Actually, I thought that it's natural too. Ah, it suits you very well, lady." Nephi's Changing Star turned to him with an expression of utter surprise. Then she glanced at Effie with a silent question. The huntress nodded. "Yeah, me too. I mean, who knows what you legacies are even made of?" Nephi's blinked a couple of times, then shook her head in bewilderment. "Well, no, it's not natural. It became like that after my first nightmare." Kai leaned forward with curiosity. "Really? What color was your hair before?" She shrugged. "Black, a normal human color." The charming archer stared at her and then smiled. "That would suit you very well too, Lady Nephi's. Ah, I can just see it." However, Sonny couldn't. The idea of Changing Star without her arresting eye-catching silver hair simply could not fit into his head, let alone the fact that she was a brunette. How was this even possible? That would look so wrong. Right. Well, as it turned out, life was full of surprises. Today he learned not one, but two entirely new things about the person he had thought he knew the best in the world. Who would have guessed that this would happen? There might be something else except for skimpy swimsuits to these beach episodes, huh? After that, they spent some time resting and lazily conversing with each other. However, pretty soon, people started to get restless from boredom. To combat it somehow, Sonny suggested the idea of playing a sports game. His motives were not at all dictated by a secret desire to see a bunch of absolutely gorgeous young people jump around and wrestle with each while very lightly dressed. Nope, not one bit. However, things didn't go as he had envisioned them. Pretty soon, Sonny found himself cursing as he was desperately pulling on the golden rope in a furious match of tug-of-war. Well, it was supposed to be furious, but what was actually transpiring was Effie casually holding the rope with one hand while the four of them, Sonny, Cassie, Kai, and Castor, were trying to move her from the spot, with no visible results whatsoever. After a while, the huntress simply pulled on the rope and sent their entire team to the ground. That's cheating. With a satisfied grin, Effie walked over and towered above him, her arms akimbo. Looking down directly at Sonny, she smirked. Weak, when did you lose your spirit, shorty? Then she winked and said in a mischievous tone, back at the cathedral you were able to perform better, not to mention last. Longer. Sonny grew bright red and gritted his teeth. Shut up. People will misunderstand. The huntress looked at him with a shocked expression. Me's misunderstand? What are you oh? Then she pretended to be horrified and covered her mouth with one hand. You, what kind of a degenerate are you? Training. I meant while you were training. While Sonny was staring at her in utter disbelief, his mouth wide open. Effie snorted, then turned away and exploded with laughter, shaking her head. The boisterous huntress giggled one last time and walked away. No more sports games, ever. That wretched troublemaker will win them all anyways. He needed to teach himself how to come up with better ideas.